All right, Nick, I show that it is 1 o'clock. We're going to go ahead and get started. I appreciate all that are here and present at this time. As you just heard, we are recording this meeting. We'll get that out to you, Jim and Nick, Brent Shimmick, anybody else that might need it to share with those that are here. Or we can just send the recording, Shannon, I think, to all. I would like to thank Shannon here, our sports staff, who is going to navigate this meeting here, share some items with you. Jason Nickleby is here from our office with officials. We are trying to bring our officials in each sport, not only to observe, but make themselves available to you on advisory. Convenient here, Nick, today on really our 5th agenda item to have Jason be a part of that as well in that conversation. Also, you may see Lisa Quidnow from our office here observing as we work with our advisories and see how we do. So I would say that this is a model advisory group with the makeup, classes represented, parts of the state represented, regions represented. Just really, really fine job by your leadership to make sure that we have the right people here. And then thank you to Nick and Brent for the agenda that we have. Nick, we've talked about this probably at least twice, if not 3 times, the items that are here on the agenda. We do have room below for other. We do only have an hour here today, and I would say we have a congested agenda because we did not have the opportunity really to meet during your conference last year, which happens quite often. I'll mention that later. There's some items here that where action's been taken at the board level that I would like to have had your input on prior to today's meeting. That's the purpose of having advisory. So, Nick, with your permission, I'm going to go a little bit out of order while Jason is here. But really to get started, Shannon, if you could share the advisory process, and then I think we'll bring Jason into the conversation as well. And just appreciate again everybody being here today. The advisory process, this is the process in which you would follow to make changes. I think the most recent change in which you were involved in this process would be seating, right? Seating 1 to 4 North, seating 1 to 4 South. We actually had multiple proposals come through this process. If there is anything on the docket to be changed, like for an example, scrimmages, the scrimmage date and or policy, this would be the process in which you would follow. It is the process that we followed for seating. As you can see at the top there, fall activities proposals are due October 15th. Brent did a great job as a past president of making sure that we have followed that. And it shows what types of things can be proposed. Note that it goes out to the regions, 8A and 8AA throughout the state for feedback. For the fall sports, they would provide feedback by January 15th. And Shannon, if you scroll down, you'll see the board would review and take action in February if there were something to be proposed. So any questions on the activity advisory process? All right, you can go ahead and close that, Shannon. I'm going to jump around a little bit on the agenda with your permission. Stop me, throw questions into chat. I'll take breaks and say, questions, feel free to unmute. But I'm going to really start under MSHSL updates, Jason, and then I'll bring you in under resources for coaches that involve officials. And then with your permission, we'll jump down to number 5. Jason's in Illinois right now, and he's working a scrimmage considered tonight for the University of Illinois, Jason. So he's out there, and then we'll let him go. To update you on MSHSL updates, one of the most important things that we're doing is taking a constitutional vote for all of our member schools this year. And that will happen in October. There's a range. I think the voting will begin on October 4th. And that is to bring 9th grade programming under our governance. And I would say that this has been a long time coming. Some of this, unfortunately, on the heels of a 9th grade football player being injured that many of you are very, very aware of. There's a student that was not covered by our catastrophic insurance. When this passes, and I believe it will, that would be an example of the impact of ninth grade governance coming under our umbrella. Insurance may or may not have been, a hurdle to cross in the past. What we found is many of our ninth graders have already been covered because they've been participating at MSHSL levels, sophomore teams through varsity, so on and so forth. Yet pay attention as a football coach, because once that ninth grade governance comes under our umbrella, many of our ninth grade teams, if you're ninth grade only, will, for instance, have coaches that may coach out of season, and or ninth grade scrimmages may take place before the acclimatization plan allows, so on and so forth. So once they come under our umbrella, they will have to act as any other MSHSL governed team. Any questions on that? All right, we'll communicate out with Nick and Ron and Dave and let you know if there's on the outcome of that or how it might impact you. The drone policy, and Shannon, you can go ahead and click on that. This has been an interesting conversation. I did hear this a bit in football a year ago, not only in football, but in other sports, as well as the FAA, right? So the FAA has very specific pilot's license, very specific directions for those flying drones. So what the FAA would say is if you're flying it over people that are not covered or at night, you're probably breaking an FAA law, so to speak, not just a rule, but a law. The board did take action last June, I believe it was, that drones flown by drone pilots and or however that they are being used are not allowed in scrimmages and or games, right? It does also say, if you look, that anything outside of those scrimmages and or games that are governed by the Minnesota State High School League follow local policy. We've had a number of people say, we used to have a school drone for photography and or this, that, or the other thing. Our lawyers have said that we can no longer have them in any way, shape, or form. That has become a common interpretation. Any unmanned aircraft or drone, according to FAA, if you ask for our recommendation, they should follow FAA regulations, but they cannot be used in contests and or scrimmages. We did have a section contest last year where a drone was being flown and used to capture film. Couldn't find the pilot. Were they using it live? Were they not? Was it being recorded? Just a whole lot of questions. That was already a bylaw violation according to the Minnesota State High School League because they weren't allowed in postseason. But this brings further clarification and on drones for scrimmages and or contests. The question came from Greg. I am not familiar with a tethered drone, but not knowing what I don't know, I would imagine that falls under this policy according to FAA. And we don't differentiate between a tethered drone or a drone. Greg, feel free to unmute and ask if there are any further questions on that.
No, that was my question. I saw other states advertising tethered drones, so it's a drone that connected to a power cord, right?
Sure.
That was the way, I think it was Louisiana, but it was the way they got around a policy in Louisiana, I believe it was. So just wanted to ask.
No, very good, Greg. Any other questions on the drone policy? Be aware of that. Shannon, I believe we also put it in football rules and policies, so you'll be able to find that language there. All right, I'm going to keep moving here with that list. If you want to go back for me, Shannon, really updates from the State High School League that apply to football or just all things Minnesota State High School League changes. This is a year we do competitive section placement. The Will Wackmans, the Eric Brevers we'll have our committee again. We'll make minor changes to that committee. Be aware of that. We'll do the enrollments first, the competitive section placement first, and we're going to get those schedules done as quickly as we possibly can. Most popular question is, we're not sure about our class and or our district. How do we provide input? Once our season ends here in November, we'll get a survey that will go out to the ADs and coaches to say, how did your district work? Anything we need to know new about your community, provide that to the committee. You've had great feedback. Our coaches have done a great job. Pretty dramatic changes on the 5A side of things, I would think. And I have heard, or I did hear, and then now we have other classes going, maybe we continue to move that down, and others saying, you know, I'm not sure I like bigger districts, right? So this is an opportunity again to make change to those districts. For me, it's how do we provide autonomy to your part of the state to give you the best regular season schedule possible. With the changes that we've made, one of the sticking points has been lower levels. And how do we accommodate those for our teams and our schools of all different shapes or sizes. So there is a timeline on the website as well for when that takes place. But for coaches, feedback in December, we'll get those enrollments as soon as we can from the Department of Education. And then we'll begin our work and keep you up to date as well. Nick, I'll work with you and Ron on that and anything that stands out for communication. Any questions on that?
Is the high school league still using free and reduced numbers, or what's the metric now that everybody gets a lunch?
Yeah, great question, Greg. The last 2 years, I believe our numbers have never been more accurate. So education benefits are automatic, not as dependent on getting kids or having kids to have to fill out the actual free and reduced lunch form. Those are already calculated in based on those that are receiving the benefits automatically within their district. And again, I believe that number for most has been larger across the state. And I believe our MSHSL enrollments, which take that into account, because it's relying on compensatory dollars from the state, have never been more accurate. So we do still use that, figure that in 40% of that compensatory dollar number or educational benefit number to create those enrollments.
Hey Bob, how do you check that if they're over the amount allotted to play?
Ask that question differently. Over the allotted number to play.
Well, obviously a 9-man, so 150 is the number to play 9-man, but yet we do have schools that are over that. So if they're over again, would they get the same opportunity to stay down, or would that be a no-go this time around?
Well, we always take for 9-player, we look at the number of teams that we have, that 150 enrollment MSHSL that is, and that's grades 8 through 11, remember?
Yep.
Trevor, on that one. If it's over 150, then they would have to appeal. And the only way to appeal is, you know, if they're within that 10% of cutoff or greater than 50% free and reduced lunch. So the district or the AD's advisory group then would hear any appeals and then say yay or nay. Does that make sense, Trevor?
Yeah, buddy, I appreciate that.
And then the other thing on that note, if I may, so I had to work with a 9-player school that appealed and was approved. And Trevor, that was a high number already. Cass Lake at 170 was approved to play 9-player. They are now co-oping with the Bug School up north, Buganigshig. And that's another 20 students. And I said to them, are you sure you want to do that? Because that's for 2 years and that bumps you up to 1A. We do not want to change those 9-player schedules this year, but it'd be a far greater climb for them to be approved to be 9-player next year, as an example, if that makes sense.
Were they 170 after free reduced, or is that before?
That was their MSHSL enrollment.
Okay.
It was under that, but now they're at 170, and that's what we look at.
Okay.
Because remember, that was 2 years ago. And then if we very quickly could, and Jason, what I'd like from this group, throw it into chat. Do you want this on this dashboard, or is this information that you don't need? Shannon, why don't you go ahead and share the comparison with NCAA first? This is an example of information Jason and I get from the National Federation on rules differences. As you think about rules changes that we're interested or not, we're always looking at the committee level. Jason and I both serve on that at this time. high school rules versus NCAA rules. For instance, the backwards pass, the type of ball, batting, blocking below the waist. Hopefully knee pads aren't on there, Jason, but they might be. Keep scrolling down there. Is this something you would like as coaches? Yes or no into chat. We could put this on your dashboard. We could get it out to you in various forms. This is one that I saw and I thought, boy, I wonder if our coaches might like this. So I am seeing yes on this. Shannon, I'm going to propose that we post this on their dashboard as a resource for them if possible. And feel free to disagree with me in chat if there's another form that you would like to have that. The next document are points of emphasis, and it's in a different format. You're also seeing this if you scroll down, Jason or Shannon. You're also going to see this probably in our online rules meetings that I believe are live at this time for our football coaches. Again, in chat, is this one that you would also like this document as well as, you know, in your online rules meetings? Is this a good resource or not something that you need? All right, that looks like a popular document too. Another way to see it. This works well for me as well. Any questions on these two documents? All right, we're going to back out of that. We can always come back if we need to. I know I'm moving at a rapid pace, but want to get to all the information on here. And I'm going to ask just to jump down to number 5. Nick, I'm going to kind of lean into you as to where this came from. And Jason's here to witness it. And then you have an opportunity then to talk to Jason about our training tapes. How is that working for our coaches on that edition? And he does a great job of getting that out to you. And that takes time and effort on his part. So thank you for that. And then also our, what else am I missing there, Jason? Training tapes and.
I have a handful of things I just want to run by the group when we have the chance, but I know I talked to Brent about this idea of, you know, sponsoring, you know, officials in your particular area as far as equipment and getting them going with registration and those kinds of things. So where Nick, tell me a little bit more about where you guys are at on that, and then we can go from there.
Well, it really was more or less just an idea from the AFCA convention, where some other states are trying to like we have, everyone has referee shortages, you know, everywhere across the board in sports. And so we were trying to think of ways to, you know, combat that. So whether that's like somehow incentivizing the reason for people to, you know, become referees, and that was we even talked about going as far back as like, should we try to work with some of the colleges, try to work with some of the high schools and try to, you know, create almost like a feeder into it. But really at the end of the day, we were, a starting point was, as the MFCA, we could allocate or dedicate some funds to go towards kind of a scholarship type thing for, you know, future or prospective referees.
Okay. Good. I would say just something for your membership is, you know, on the recruiting side of things and getting
Jason?
people into it. Yes.
I'm sorry, it's Stolsky. I just got in. Yeah, I was, we were in the same meeting with Nick at exec director stuff. Yeah, we're serious about this. If there's a way to facilitate it, I think that would be pretty difficult. Can I ask you a question? You spoke at the clinic last year.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have the numbers in front of me. Did you have very many at your session?
The room was overflowing, and we had to be dragged out of there. So,
Well, isn't that a message of sorts? Either you're such a handsome fellow.
which,
Well, no, let's leave
they
it
were
there.
told that session was on radio, I think, Ron.
Let's leave it there. Well, it could have been, but hey, that's an indicator. And so, however, we can, you know, aid the high school league in putting something together. we're willing to do that. I know that probably pretty difficult. I don't know. How many associations, you know, Jason, are there in the state?
Well, across all of our sports, we have 100 unique associations, and in football, we have close to 20.
Yeah,
Um, and not all schools utilize associations, you know, when you
sure.
get
I know
Southwest
that too, yeah.
Minnesota, they kind of get their own games and such. But what I would say is, for facilitating this and working on the recruitment side of things, I just think each program, you know, when you have your meetings with your parents, and with your kids for that matter, you know your parents, you know your kids, you know who would be good prospective referees, and officials and so on. And I think if you get some interest out of those connections, then you could start them down that process of how to obtain some of the funds that the MFCA has put together to assist them with getting uniforms and registration and those kinds of things. And if every program did that with one person, we'd have 500 new officials every year.
Well, that would be a bullet point that either the league or we could send out, because I would guess literally every football program in the state has a preseason parents meeting. You know, they go over, you know, this stuff.
Yep.
And a bullet point, we're gonna put together a blast here in about a week. We can do it if you want, a suggestion to, however we phrase it, encourage those in the stands, you know, to recruit officials. And if they're interested, see the coach, blah, 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 and then find at least develop some kind of template. Because I
Yep.
would bet sitting in those meetings, there would be a number, they're officiating anyway from the stand.
Fans.
They
Oh,
might
yeah.
as well,
Oh, yeah.
might as well get the stripes on.
That's right. Across the country, the number one new official demographic is parents of kids that are either graduating or moving on from playing. And that's in every sport, because they've been around the sport for a while and they have a pretty good feel for it. And they come from the work world and have some skill sets that could allow them to be successful in officiating. And it's not that we don't want college kids, or we do. We want them. Their shelf life is really good. But the number one recruit is that parent group. And again, if every school got one out of that group to give it a try, we'd be in pretty good shape.
And then if the league put together 1 or 2 area training sessions, an hour training session in Detroit Lakes and an hour in Owatonna,
Yep.
for those, you know, we can find a way. This is good. This is a good project.
On the bullet point or the sharing side of things, Bob and I will work together to get you some language. I would say that, just so everyone knows, on the AD dashboard for sure. I'm not sure about coaches, but on the AD dashboard, they have an officiating toolkit, and there's things in there like how to host officials and how to work with them and so on. And then there's also PowerPoint slides that you can put in that parent meeting. And they revolve around recruitment of officials and next steps and who to contact and all those kinds of things.
So we should include ADs in this whole thing.
I
Thank you.
would recommend that, yes.
Well, thank you.
Jason, I brought it up at the Spring Coach Association meeting, the statewide one,
Mhm.
for all the other associations too. I think, you know, all the other sports. And I think with, you know, our fund balance, not that we're trying to gloat that, but I think we can be a leader in the state and try to show these other associations how to get this done. Because
Right.
every sport's needed, so.
Yep. But I would say football, the good news is that we are at 1,200 registered already, and last year we had 1,150 total. And so and we still got 3 weeks before the deadline, so we'll still have probably another 100 or so that come in. So that's good. The bad news is that the average age of that group is the oldest it's ever been. And so that group is just not going to be around as long as we want them to be, and so we need to replace them. And so I think working through the coaches group to specifically target parents and then kids that when they're done playing, which is what I did last night with the University of Illinois team, to tell them, hey, only 1% of you is moving on to the next level. So the rest of you, coaching, officiating, stay involved in this great game. And that's how we get at them. I'll work with Bob to supply some messaging for you, Ron and Nick, Brent, for the coaches group as a whole. And as we mentioned, I would really encourage you, including your AD, as part of that process, because again, it's not just a football thing, it's an every sport thing. And the more we can connect our administration and our other coaches and our communities in this effort, the better off we're going to be. So.
Well, Brent, we'll count on you to include a few ADs. Dialogue's important, but implementation is progress. So let's get on this thing. I mean, we can help.
We'll get them and IAAA involved too.
I'm already thinking of a sponsor for this program. I mean,
Ron, I just saw your message as well. I apologize. I didn't see that. I'm glad you're on the meeting.
No, I was building a rocket ship out there.
Yeah,
I mean, I'll tell you.
I'll get them and IAAA on that too, Ron.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and you know,
Yeah.
with Brent being on our board as well, Brent, this is something you may want to update our board on as well at the workshop or next our next board meeting in October. Jason, let's keep moving here if we could, with permission.
I got just a couple more things, Bob, if you don't mind, just for the group. One, we're in the process of developing a uniform poster. We did this in basketball about 5 or 6 years ago, and it was really well received. And we've seen less and less issues on the basketball front with regards to uniforms and equipment and those kinds of things. So we are in the process of developing that for football, soccer, and volleyball for the fall. And we hope to get that out to coaches here, hopefully in the next week. Some kids from Minneapolis North were nice enough to help us with that. They did a great job. And it just will outline all the requirements, expectations relative to uniforms and equipment and apparel and adornments and all those kinds of things. And we just would really recommend this group, emphasizing that to other coaches, to show to the players prior to games. This is the rules book expectations. This is how we're supposed to dress for games, so that we just can go ahead and play football and not worry about uniform issues. And officials aren't crazy about it. They don't like being uniform police. They don't want to chase people around. Coaches, you have better things to do, on game night. And so if we can use that poster to help us make some progress there, that would be really helpful. So look for that in the next week or so.
Jason, can I comment on that briefly?
Yeah.
Yeah, so one of the most rewarding really sessions of last year was going to Minneapolis North, and they had 4 or 5 students. We said, be dressed in, whites and blues, or your lights and darks, whites and darks. Have illegal equipment, legal equipment. We'll take pictures of all of it. Charles Adams, Ron and Nick, was awesome. He wasn't even there, but they were ready to go. I think we saw 7 or 8 different visors that they wear in 7-on-7 that are not legal during the season. And so that was a fun dialogue. But just thank you to Charles and Minneapolis North. It'll be a PDF version, again, as Jason had said, and then we'll get you the posters. Pictures worth 1,000 words. I am so impressed with our football coaches, the questions that they've asked. Part of the rationale for this is we've been talking about a uniform change, rule change to numbers for 5 years. This is the year, and I'm still getting questions on that. Edina called the other day and said, well, it says we can't have a multicolored number. That's not what it says, right? It might read that way, but the body of the number needs to clearly contrast. Could it have that yellow piping around a white number? It can, but that border color cannot be used to differentiate between the number and the color of the jersey. Clearly contrasting needs to be between the body of the number and the jersey color, if I said that right, Jason. But that is a question if you're hearing it from football coaches. Otherwise, our group of coaches has done a great job of making sure our uniforms are going to be up to speed. The other thing I'm going to reiterate, I heard it loud and clear in Boston at the national meeting. You have pants and can get pants where the pants will cover their knees. Just do it. It's not the 6'7" kid that has a 28-inch waist. Yes, they have pants for them. Get your knees covered, please. And officials will. That is a point of emphasis. We don't want t-shirts hanging out under your jersey. Do not make our officials uniform police. Let's be compliant as shown, and let's have a great start to that year. Jason, what else do you have for us?
You mentioned the rules process. Just for the group, as Bob mentioned earlier, Bob and I are both on the NFHS Football Rules Committee. So if you have or your coaches have rules ideas, suggestions, get those to Bob by October 1st, because we need to put those together and they need to be submitted on time to the committee to be considered. So if any of you have rule suggestions, get those to Bob by October 1st. The rules module is up, as Bob mentioned. Reminder that that's expected for all coaches in the 10 through 12 programming, even volunteers. So my brother's a volunteer coach. I have to remind him he also is forced to listen to my voice. But if you have any questions about that module, be sure to send that to one of our coordinators or to me. I'm happy to assist with that. And then Ron mentioned it, but I wanted to thank the group for the opportunity to speak at the conference. It was really good dialogue. It was great back and forth with coaches about the top 10 rules that affect high school coaches. And again, really appreciate the opportunity to speak there. And new this year, because some coaches have been asking about more face-to-face interactions with officials prior to the season, we do have in-person clinics for our officials that they need to do for postseason consideration. And they are on the 12th at Wadena Deer Creek, and then on the 20th at Waconia. And if coaches would like to attend those clinics, you are more than welcome to come to those. You would still need to view the rules module online, but you're welcome to attend those clinics. I just wanted to let you know that is an opportunity that's there. And then finally, Bob mentioned the training tapes and the memos. We're going to continue with those this year. Those are the expectations regarding mechanics and rules and philosophy that for our officials, and we want coaches to know what officials are being told, so that we're all on the same page when it comes to these things. And as far as I'm aware, the coaches are interested in still receiving those. You could certainly put that in the chat if you're still interested in that. And we can continue to send those out if you have an interest in that. I think it's really cut down on a lot of misunderstandings about rules or how things are handled. And we're happy to get those out to coaches if you're still interested in that. So those are the items I had, Bob. And Nick or Ron, Brent, anything else you need from me?
No, we have a clinic committee meeting our planning meeting on Friday. I'm thinking maybe we should have you back again.
Happy to do so, Ron.
Yeah, I think that'd be a good move. Thank you.
You bet.
Thanks, Jason.
Jason, maybe if you could hang on here for the pre-contest timeout, that's gonna be a
Yeah.
new concept as well. I
Yep.
would just like to thank Jason. I would also say the training tapes and memos are kind of, we can't predict what's gonna happen, in 3 weeks. If Shimmick's hiding the tight end on the line, and is that legal or isn't it? It's an opportunity to answer some of those questions that we're just not sure what's gonna happen, again, when our games get started. And boy, are we looking forward to those, practices and games get started. And a reminder that 0 week started for a portion of our 9-player schools. And actually we have a 1A or 2A schools, I believe, are also utilizing 0 week this week as well. So best of luck to them. Otherwise, if we could, under MSHSL updates, pre-contest timeout, even if had we met last spring, this is not something that it was conceptual more in nature, but this is something used around the country. And it's really different than your officials meeting prior to the game. Brent Shimmick just held it up, right? It's something he received in the mail potentially already from us. We're going to incorporate this voluntarily. This is highly recommended, but it's really a way to address anything, really outside of football, but also including football at your site. So you're going to bring the coaches together. Typically, it'll be offered by an administrator, the AD that's on site, or another staff member. And I don't know what that looks like at a B squad game or maybe a JV game on a Saturday morning or a Monday. But it really gives that manager, coaches, officials, and medical personnel or professionals that are there. Where's the AED, right? In case of inclement weather, the forecast says potential lightning. Here's what we do. Here's who makes the decision during a contest, really designating those important items for the health and safety and to minimize risk for all involved. It's not a meeting that's going to take very long, but it sets the expectation, right? And let's say it's homecoming and we have two bitter rivals, right? Let's address some of what we're going to experience at that time, and let's get on to playing the game of football and making sure that we can focus on the game in football in this case, and not other items that are happening outside of the game. I would say this: we've worked very hard. You've worked very hard on behavior expectations. We had minor interruptions to the game, but we did have some. Right? 2 years ago, we had mass ejections in one of our section games. We don't want to go back to that. But every year when I go to our national meeting and I hear about 10 to 12 lives lost in sport, and how could we save that life if necessary? And the key is that everybody knows their emergency action plan. We know what to do if a student or a coach, we've had that as well. We know that in this state goes down. What do we do to give them the best opportunity to come out of that as successful as possible? So Jason's been a part of this as well. Jason, anything else I'm missing here on the pre-contest or medical timeout prior to the game?
No, not really. I think just generally speaking, football by and large does a really good job with this, managing, who's responsible for what, whether it's safety or behavior or weather or whatever it is. But our other sports don't do as well. And so it's trying to provide a template for them to follow to get these kinds of things covered. We're recommending in our other sports around 10 minutes before the contest. I would say in football, that's going to vary a lot more than the other sports, just because typically the officials meet with the coaches 30 minutes before kick. And so maybe that's a good time, or maybe when everybody comes back out of the locker room, maybe that's a good time. Just something to work on at your site. But I think it's just going to be a really good process for our schools to follow to make sure everyone's on the same page about who's going to do what if one of these situations were to occur. And hopefully they don't, but if they do, we'll know who's responsible, and we'll hopefully be in a lot better spot because we covered those things in advance.
Question, you mentioned mass ejections at a contest last year or the year before. Did the league impose penalties?
We did. According to policy, Ron.
Okay,
I think the hard part in that one is we have a rule for people coming off the sideline, right? And when everybody comes off and the officials leave the field out of fear and they say everybody's ineligible, you're not able to play the next game with a team.
Okay.
Right? That's something we don't ever want to have to do.
we have a code of ethics. That's why I was wondering, but we haven't gone so far as to feel like we can impose any penalty. We leave that to you.
Yep. As a governing body, that's a good idea. We don't ever want to do that. We don't ever want
Yeah.
our officials in that position.
No,
That is an extreme example.
yeah,
But it is something we could have avoided.
And Bob, I would note that that is also one of the national points of emphasis is handling altercations and post-game interactions. And as Bob mentioned, there is a rule for leaving the bench area during an altercation. And if a player leaves the bench area during an altercation, they're ejected by rule. Even if they just go out there and stand or they're trying to break things up, that's not their role. That's the coach's and administrator's role to break things up. And so, you know, if you feel that your program, they need to hear that from you, I think that's
I mean,
good.
your phone's going.
So I think it's good for them to hear from you guys, your players and your program, to say, hey, if there's an altercation on the field, we don't go out there. We're going to let the officials handle it, break it up, or the coaches, and then we'll go on from there. But when everybody leaves the sideline, it becomes really problematic, and it's something, as Bob mentioned, we don't really want to handle, but we're seeing more and more of that across the country, unfortunately. And we saw it in football last year, and we saw it in basketball a couple times, and we're just hoping to have a little better handle on that this year.
Again, this is voluntary. We highly recommend that someone from within your school, feel free to ask your AD if you'll be doing the pre-contest medical timeout. Again, football's done this well for a long time with that pre-game meeting, and a couple more items to really address. And that is an opportunity for you. You can go ahead and stop sharing that. I would say this, that football has always been on the forefront of change, socially and in sport. You know, Brent said it regarding officials, like we need to lead in this area. Football's always done that. Your school needs to prepare for a very divisive election year, right? And you are the community event on a Friday night or a Saturday or whatever, Thursday this year, whatever night you have to play. Your administration needs to be prepared, again, in an election year, that there are going to be political happenings in your stadiums. Let's keep our student athletes out of that, our coaches out of that. We know it's a huge community event, something to celebrate, yet I believe our contests are going to be impacted politically this year. It's happened in other years as well on elections. But this should be a place for us to celebrate the sport of football and our community. And you have more influence and impact on your student athletes probably than anyone else in the building. And take advantage of that opportunity as well. Something else you may want to address. Any other questions on what we've mentioned under MSHSL updates? Otherwise, Jason, thank you. Jason, I think this is a great example of what we want to do with our advisory groups to make sure that we're empowering our coaches in all sports to have some of the same information. If I may, Nick, if we could go to number 4 there. And I'm really looking for guidance or advice from this group. We are going to seed 1 to 4 North, 1 to 4 South for this year. I'm proud to say we have 26 sites for 28 games. As I map this out, our sites, it's really, some of it's more predictable in North and South. You know, we're bringing on Dover Iota as a 9-player site. Thank you to them. A new site. I know where they're at in that part of the state. Yet I'm anticipating you're gonna have to travel more or greater distances, and especially in greater Minnesota, because it's just that much more difficult to get to the central site. We're also going to need flexibility. Coaches need to understand, I'm gonna do my best to give everybody the same number of days in between games. Yet it's gonna be more and more difficult with the sites that we have and some of the restrictions that they have. So for instance, 1A game for the quarterfinals might be on a Thursday. The opponent may be playing on a Friday, and there may be 1 day of difference in between then and, the semifinal games at US Bank Stadium. As of right now, I only have 2 games where that may be the instance. Then also know in 6A with a very unique bracket that some of those teams may be still in play. And we may have to shift again on the night that they play versus the night that they host in order to make that work. We had some 6A games. We received some feedback last year, why is such and such, why are we going all the way to St. Michael? Right? Trevor would die to travel 14 miles as opposed to 2 hours for a game. Just know that geographically in the metro area, it's not always going to make sense because I'm not quite sure who's going to be seated where and where that's going to come out. So there will be an increase in travel, I believe, but we have great sites. We're going to have great venues. We're going to offer a great atmosphere. Weather is never predictable, as you know, but be patient with this. And then what I'm looking for from this group is, I believe we have one class of football that doesn't match the sections 1 to 4 in the south versus sections 5 through 8 in the north. Is that something that a subcommittee would like to take a look at? Shannon, if you just wanted to share the map in 1A football class 1A. So this is what, those that know Ribsy and love Ribsy, this is why he said we can't go sections 1 to 4 in the south and 5 to 8 in the north, because the green is technically section 4. And Ribsy, being a geography major, says there's no way that 4 is in the south on this map. So this is where we would look at and say, in this model, I would say sections 1, 2, 3, and 5 would be in the south, and the other sections would then be in the north. Actually, this is a pretty clean line in 1A, but it's why we couldn't go sections 1 through 4 and 5 through 8. We have others where it's going to be, closer. Is this something you want to do together as a group, or would you like a subcommittee to look at this? I have Will Wackman and others that are ready to place teams on the Saturday when we're done. And we're going to try and predict those sites to get you that information as soon as possible. But you're not going to have your site as in advance as you've had in the past either, which will be again another item that'll just be different that coaches have to understand. So to ask the question differently, would you like to look at each class on this and assist, or is there a smaller group that you'd like to assist in determining who is the north and who is the south when it comes to our different classes? Nick, thoughts on that?
Bob, this would be for this season, correct?
That is for this postseason.
I think I don't know if I can speak for all of us, but I think doing it, if we can do it today and get it done, I think that's probably where all of us would want to land versus creating another subcommittee and meeting once things get really busy here in a couple of weeks.
Sounds good. I'm prepared to do that. And I will just tell you, feel free to disagree with me. I think other than this class, in my mind, it's going to be sections 1 to 4 in the south and sections 5 to 8 in the north. So are we in agreement on 1A that the south would be 1, 2, 3, and 5, and the north would be 4, 6, 7, and 8, identified by the numbers and the colors on the right?
Yeah.
Anybody object to that?
So move, Nick.
All right.
Yep.
I'm going to move on to 2A then. I look at these quite frequently. Slow me down if we need to, but we do not have a lot of time, and we do have important topics left here as well. So if you kind of focus on 1, 2, 3, and 4, you can see that We do have some of the green, right, as well, in the north. We also have 5, right, in with 6. So the 4 would still be south here as I see it by the number of schools, but note that we do have a couple that are north of some of our purple, which are 5. So I would propose here that we would still go 1 through 4 to the south and sections 5 to 8 to the north.
I mean, it looks like they're off main highways anyway too, which makes it easy from a travel standpoint.
All right, with no objections, I'm gonna move forward. We'll do 9-player last, just in the order in which we're going. That is a very interesting map, by the way, when you look at it from a north-south perspective. Shannon's doing a great job again. We get into the metro with some of our larger, this is, what are we at here? 3A, Shannon? Class 3A?
Yes, this is 3A.
Okay, so this is 3A again. Again, a little more cluttered in the metro, yet a pretty clean line. Where 1 to 4, I believe, should probably still be the south or would be the south, 5 through 8 to the north. Shannon, do you want to hover over that 3A southernmost blue team? So show you, so there's Montevideo. They're a little bit of an outlier there. Any objections to that? Okay, let's move on to 4A as we get more metro-centric. It changes again. I would say here again that although you can enlarge that in the metro there a little bit, hit that plus sign a couple times for me, Shannon. Any objections to stay 1 to 4 again in the south, 5 to 8 in the north? You can minimize that again, Shannon, so they can see. Just remember, no 2 schools cross each other's paths. That's the geographic contiguity as we build these maps.
I think the one outlier in that one is the yellow really high.
Yep.
3A. Would it make more sense to switch them and purple, them and 5 around, just because that one's way up there and then you've got some of the 1A's way south?
Yeah, you could potentially, when you blow it up in the middle there, it's almost a horse apiece, other than the one school of Chisago Lakes.
I don't know what else to do, but section 2, 4A has a lot of southern schools. So you look, okay, let's say Marshall ends up playing a Duluth area school, right? Are we okay saying Marshall's in the north and St. Peter?
I would say no to that. I think what Nick was proposing is making yellow south. Is that correct, Nick?
That makes sense. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Orange, I think, would stay in that southern half.
Mhm.
And you
Again,
know,
I
if you
think-
wanted to switch 3 and 5 around because of Chisago being up so high. And then if you look at 5, they're all in the metro.
Let's blow that up again, Shannon. Let's take a look at the purples and yellows, I think is what we're looking at here.
Yes.
We're really talking about one school only if they were to qualify. And it's only for the site, remember. Other than you are seating 1 to 4 and 1 to 4. Would you prefer to have yellow in the north? And again, I would say a majority of the purple are still south.
That's what I was just thinking with Chisago way up there. And when you look at 94 as a divide, it's about equal minus Chisago.
I don't know, I think you're a little bit splitting hairs a little bit with Whoever's the furthest south too. But you said this is just for the site only, Bob, right?
It really is. I mean, it has a little bit to do with your competition. You as coaches are gonna be more concerned about that than I am. You remember, this will be for 1 year. We'll look at the maps again next year. And then I would propose we do the same thing for the next 2 years. So Nick, I'm gonna throw it out there. How about we leave it 1 to 4 south, 5 to 8 north for 1 year? Take a look at the sections again and go from there.
That's fine. Chisago's always on the bubble of 4 and 5A anyway, and to base a decision off of them, maybe it's not.
They also go north. This is about as far south as they often have to play as well, depending on their class too. So they are a team that sticks out. All right, are we moving into 5A? All right, do you want to blow that up, please? Even more there, and let's get into that metro. Again, you can see some of your purple, right? That would be 5 through 8 are further south. Similar to your greens. Otherwise, your line is, you know, again, pretty good. Who's that northeast most? Is that Montemedi up there, green? You know, again, that's going to be considered a southern team, similar to Chisago. But again, I think 1 to 4, 5 to 8 does work geographically again. You can minimize that again so they can see it, Shannon. Any objections to that? All right, 9-player. You gotta be really creative visually here to take a look at this one. In terms of your 9-player, again, your green is really north, but it's again further south than again most of your others. I think the one here would be to say is, I have a hard time believing 5 is south, but it's also hard to say 4 is south visually as well on this. I think the tricky thing in this is going to be, you know, quarterfinal sites like Moorhead, Dover, Iota, you know, I don't know who the northernmost green team is, but this is where you're going to see some of the travel that they're pretty used to it, unfortunately. But you know, they're going down to Dover, Iota, which is closer to Rochester. You can see the travel on one of those quarterfinal games. Any objections to not going 1 to 4 south, 5 to 8 north for your seating? All right, so what I'm hearing is we have one class, which I predicted, 1A, where we will make that adjustment. Please note that with coaches that ask, you will be seating 1 to 4. We will not, obviously, we will not drop the high and the low in seating 1 to 4. You will just not be seating yourself like our other sports. It's going to be fun to see how this plays out. And then in the crossover, our games in the semis as well. The high north seed will play the low south seed and vice versa. Brent's aware of that. Nick, I'm happy to show that to you if you want. It's gonna be fun to try this. We'll see how it goes and works, and might create some different excitement. But Jason said it before our meeting today as well. And Shannon, you can stop sharing that. We had great games last year in the Prep Bowl and in the semifinals. Kudos to all of our coaches and our teams. And if we can make that tournament even better, I'm looking forward to seeing that. Any questions on really number 4 around state tournament seating? And we will not have a subcommittee then, Nick. You just did
Wasn't there one other thing you wanted to talk about from a Northern standpoint with the time, or like both of the games played on the same day in the state tournament, or addressing that?
I think our schedule hasn't changed. So we've grouped some of our, I think 9-player, 1A and 2A. Both games are on the same days now. Shannon, was there something else that we changed on that? Nick,
I thought we had talked, just having like and Brent, you and I had talked, I thought just like a yearly rotation, who starts at a certain time or something like that. This was a while ago when we talked about it.
Oh, you know what?
Well,
I think you're,
it used to be the north side was like at 9 o'clock game, like last year, and the south side was a 10:30. But now with you cross bracketing, you're gonna have a north and south team in each time bracket, no matter what.
yeah, here's what Nick, I think I remember that you saying, so who plays first? You know, on those games now when you come to US Bank Stadium. And maybe what we do is, you know, I think I said this year, the North plays in that first game. And then the South plays in the second game, and we just flip it every other year.
Yeah.
So you're not
That's what
always the
makes- that's
early
what
game.
makes
Nick.
sense. Yeah.
What I would say, Nick, is let's observe it for how it works this year. And if this group feels very strongly that you don't want to be the first game or the second game in those classes where we're playing back-to-back games, which has been really popular, by the way, with our coaches, that that we have the ability to do so. And then I chopped other off of there, but we do have scrimmages. So Nick's heard from a number, I think Brent has as well. I think a lot of this comes from coaches looking at their scrimmage and what they're doing on their scrimmage. Obviously trying to minimize risk for our athletes, keeping them healthy and safe, but also games being moved up in the first week. How do we get the most time in between our scrimmage and our first game for athletes to heal that got dinged up, right? And with the games being moved up, could we move the scrimmages to Friday? I'm bringing it to sports medicine again. And I'm going to ask for a written answer in that. They totally understand, the doctors and athletic trainers, the interest in having more time between the scrimmage date and the first game. They have no interest in taking a day off acclimatization. They're really two separate topics. And, you know, I don't know, Brent, were you out in Boston? I don't think you were. But I spent, you know, we had almost probably 40 states together. There's almost no difference between one states to another's in terms of that first day of scrimmage time. I'm going to ask the question again, but I'm going to bet that our doctors especially are going to say, do not take a day off of acclimatization to try and scrimmage that day earlier. But let's see what they say. And I'll also keep an eye on it from a national perspective in terms of that 15-day acclimatization, including that first scrimmage and days off. I know for the coaches, it's only 24 hours difference. That being said, if we are an outlier and something were to happen on that scrimmage date, or if you're scrimmaging on Friday and somebody else is on Saturday, you do not want to be on the back end of that liability if something catastrophic were to happen from a health perspective. Anything I'm missing on the scrimmage side of things, and is the organization really looking at doing scrimmages differently? I'm interested in that as well.
Bob, you may or may not have been at our, we had a reps meeting at our recent, our clinic last year. And one of our coaches proposed scrimmaging earlier. And by hand vote, the coaches there, the reps, were opposed to it.
Okay.
They were opposed. I would say probably unanimously. I mean, there were a few, but so that died in the water right there.
Okay.
In terms of our reps, MFCA reps.
Yeah, and again, it was a topic that was brought, and I did want to have that discussion. I'm interested in representing our coaches, obviously, in their interest, but also to protect our coaches when it comes to, you know, the risk minimization side of things, and trust our medical experts on that.
Well,
So, Ron,
that
I
was-
appreciate.
That was an
that.
indicator right there to me. I thought, well, he proposed it and it was unanimously, there were a few hands maybe, but overwhelmingly opposed to that idea.
Thank you, Ron. I'm going to open it up here for other items. I know we're over our hour. Nick, one thing I forgot, Brent and I have talked about it. Nick and I have talked about it. You can quit sharing the agenda here too, Shannon. The other item I wanted to bring, and I've been pretty adamant that whatever we're doing is not working in terms of the prep bowl and the coaches area or the pass that gets them up into the lodge suites. I think since we've been in US Bank Stadium, which has been it's been all of my time, but most of you are aware of that. I see very few coaches going up there. How you get there is really difficult in terms of explaining. Coaches often believe that it's a pass +1, which it is not. It also doesn't get you into the game for free. I'd like this group really to consider doing something different. Either that or the Coaches Association is going to have to take it over with the Vikings and US Bank Stadium, because we're not getting the benefit out of trying to offer something that number one isn't being used and just continues to cause confusion with our coaches.
It is a hassle and it's not worth doing. Period. You maybe have a half a dozen coaches who, way back in the old days, and a lot of us are used to people. No, it's too big a hassle. And I've had coaches who really enjoy that say, hey, you got, well, you know it, Bob. You work with the Metro, you know, it's a hassle and not worth doing. And my recommendation is let it go. That's my personal recommendation. But let her go.
I think there's other options within the stadium. The stadium's so big, right? If there's an area you wanted to sit for coaches and in the seats, you know, I think that would be an option. Brent has talked about one of the other clubs, which is accessible to others, but there's plenty of areas if coaches want to meet, but have a designated meeting space with no food or drink, the furthest from the field as you can get. We aren't getting that benefit, as Ron said.
One thing though that was very successful about 4 or 5 years ago, we were able to get the Delta Club for the All-Star game.
Sure.
And we brought back a number of former All-Star coaches and players, and that place was very, very busy. Dave Fritzie is our game manager and cohort with the Vikes. And I think the last couple of years, the Vikes have said no to that.
Okay.
But that is a possibility, and we'll pursue that a little bit, because we had really, really good attendance there, and you know that would be a nice perk for our coaches.
Yeah, I'm always interested in hearing other options for you, but I want to bring to your attention when something's just not working. I think I said the lodge suites, it's the cabin suites, I believe is the correct term on that. So I'm going to propose that we just don't have that available unless you tell me otherwise before November. Great move, I think, for us this year with 5 weeks in November. Reminder, we are not on Thanksgiving weekend. We are the week before. I think that's a good thing for a number of people, and not having that weekend between the semis and the prep bowl as well. So, Nick, that's really it for me. Ron, I open myself up to anything else. Brent.
Trevor brought it up earlier, and maybe we had, you know, this year it'll be the same as it was 2 years ago. So sections will come out first, and then your districts. But there's that, how long is that period for schools to appeal? Because I know I had 3 schools up here, you know, that have part-time ADs, or their ADs are also principal, that didn't appeal. They ended up 11-man because they didn't know they had so many days to appeal and they didn't get it done. So you want to review that real quick?
Yeah, so it's all dependent on when we get those enrollment numbers. And again, if I had the timeline right in front of me, it's about a 5-day period of time. So let's say those numbers come out last week in February, first week in March from the MDE. We're really trying to push them on it to get those numbers out. We're going to draw the cut lines immediately, and then you have the ability to opt up prior to that. So if you know you want to be a 6A school, but you're not sure if you're going to be 5A or 6A, your AD would say we always want to be 6A no matter what our enrollment is, as an example. If you want to appeal down, you can only appeal if you have greater than 50% free or reduced lunch and or are within 10% of that cut line. So let's say again, that cut line is 1,400 for 5A. But if you are 5A and you come in at 13.99, you could appeal down to, that 4A, that would go through AD's advisory, but you have to appeal for that, right? Or you have to apply for that appeal. So that's gonna be somewhere in that area of March, where that AD would have to appeal on your behalf. We have had schools that have missed that in the past, not very many, because I tend to catch most of those that are outliers in football, and I will
Well, we had-
ask them.
We had 3 and 9 man just in section 7 that were like at 152, 153.
Yeah,
And they didn't appeal because they weren't paying attention to the emails. So then they ended up 11 man.
and we emailed them individually.
I know.
We can make that more available as well. Do we have the line from the last one? It is on the website under competitive section placement as a resource. So it is a tight window of time. I'm going to anticipate that I think our classes could change this year. I think 6A is going to have quite a few changes this year. I think we're probably going to have 3 schools added. If we're tracking it every year, I think we'll have 3 new schools in 6A, most likely including Moorhead. And then a school like Mayo, that's probably going to drop back to 5A, which we didn't anticipate last time, but that's kind of the trend in terms of enrollments right now. That being said, I think with the great work that we've done on our districts, we're at our district committee, we're going to get you those districts pretty quick, and they moved really well last time. So thanks for your work on that as well. Good question, Brent. Anything else?
Good meeting, Bob.
Thank you, Ron. And again, I know you want Jason more than Bob, but anything we can do to take care of some of these in the spring. And Nick and Brent, this is probably the best time for advisory, Ron, in the fall. Once we get into our seasons, it's hard to get this group back together. I know what Ron would like, in-person meetings when we can, and you just tell me when we can meet.
Yeah, thanks, Bob. Appreciate it.